Hola Internet, so Firebolt.
A pseudo-orbiter.
And welcome to...
I love the way you put like a bit of an accent on Firebolt when you're talking in a different language.
Well, I've done that with French, so I just kept doing it. Anyway, welcome to Breaking Borders, episode fucking motherfucking 3, bitch. Yeah, I'm doing well.
Wow.
I had a bit of an interesting Friday evening, so less said about that the better.
Tell.
Anyway, how are you? I've not actually talked to you like for most of today.
No, well, you've been kind of semi-comatose still, haven't you? And I probably will be by the end of this evening, so that's fine. Just swap places. I'm fine. It's my rest day, Sunday.
Okay, cool.
I spent all day yesterday cleaning all the windows in the house, outside and in, and I've done the hoovering today. Well, let's get on with something interesting, shall we? Because that's boring. This is not breaking bollocks.
Okay. Today we are covering Portugal.
Which is rather a large area to cover.
It's
what are we
actually
covering it with?
Relatively. Oh, well, yeah, okay. No, we are covering the history and music of Portugal, as is the format of this
Whatever
pretty
this is.
new podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We'll probably be going, I don't know, in terms of history, like probably about up to either 1580 or 1640 for reasons that we'll get into.
I wasn't biting my nails there.
About halfway down the notes that I've got, which are even longer than Indonesia's, so we are probably going to need two parts. I'm great. Anyway,
Cheers. What are you drinking?
Menabria.
And I am on the McEwen's Champion award-winning premium beer. Very not Portuguese.
Yeah, I assume there are some Portuguese beers that are commonly sold in the UK, but
I would imagine so, but
I didn't bother getting them. Okay. Anyway, to kick us off, I do actually want to talk about. I know we've gotten feedback saying that we should just get straight into it, but I want to talk about. I can't remember how time works, so we may have talked about this before. That policing bill.
Oh yeah, there were I don't know what happened, but there were protests organised all around England yesterday, I think.
Yeah, and well, essentially, if you don't know, this bill sort of contains an amendment on protest laws, essentially meaning if you're deemed to be causing a disturbance through noise, that you can legally be arrested, which essentially outlaws peaceful protest.
There is concern that it's heading towards something dangerously authoritarian because of that, in combination with the changes that they made to the justice laws following that court case about Brexit, where the government were found to have acted unlawfully. And also, there was something else that was a part of it. I can't remember what it was now. The fact that apparently they've passed a law now which means that undercover police have a license to break the law in conducting their duties.
Yeah, we are fast turning into effectively Russia in terms of what the police are allowed to do. Also, this bill, quite notably, legalizes what are effectively pogroms against a hated ethnic minority in the UK, gypsies and travellers.
It's quite interesting to note. I mean, I know we're talking about sort of not specific news to the country we're covering at the moment, but the fact that we're a podcast about breaking borders, and we're actually, during the time we're covering Portugal, probably going to be voting to erect a new border.
Yeah, Scottish elections are on the horizon.
That'll be before. Actually, it'll be the day that part 2 of this comes out.
Okay.
I think.
But I mean, I did see it pointed out as well. We're recording this. Is this Easter Sunday?
It is, yes.
Yes, we're recording this on Easter Sunday.
I don't have any chocolate.
That Christians can completely ignore their own faith there of like Mary and Joseph being turned away from everywhere when talking about travelers because this country's just fucking oh yeah, that's another thing. The government's own report on itself saying that it's not institutionally racist, despite its own report basically saying that. But
that made me fucking laugh, though. I mean, the whole prospect, the whole idea of basically it's the same as if somebody claims that they're being abused by somebody else, you go to the abuser to ask them what their opinion is on it.
Yeah.
It's like, and the abuser says, no, on reflection, we don't think we are.
And
abusing.
Following disgusting scenes of police violence in protests across the country, including against several members of the press, which have now sort of reneged on their initial standpoint of, it's just a few violent protesters, because now they're the ones under attack. Yeah, so there've been a lot of attacks like that, and also quite a lot more worrying. There've been police raids of the style of like anti-terror raids, including one which saw a 16-year-old girl have tasers pointed at her.
Yeah. The other thing, speaking of our sponsor who wants us to stick with country-related news, but it's their fault because I'm bringing it up now. They sent me a news article about a guy who's running for Holyrood. I think it was one of the islands. I'm not sure if it was Shetland or somewhere up that way. Who's basically just said that he thinks that COVID is because of gay marriage. And he realises that it's a controversial view, but he's just saying what his faith tells him to be true. That it's a punishment.
Okay. Just like a side note on that, like, this is entirely unrelated to a lot of things right now, but that whole like idea of Christianity being against homosexuality is actually due to a deliberate mistranslation by an American Christian organization in the 40s, which kind of changed what was essentially a passage condemning paedophilia to one condemning homosexuality.
Well, it's all translated from Hebrew anyway, that originally, I mean, there are some Hebrew words that don't actually have a translation, a literal translation, so it's all interpretation, isn't it?
It's all complete subjective bullshit anyway, so, you know.
So kicking that off with our Easter Sunday précis of...
We are going to get into Christianity in this episode, I think.
Oh, no, not again. I've already been through that.
Because there's some interesting things with Portugal and Christianity.
Right, okay.
More in the first half, probably.
So let me know before we're going into the history bit. And
do you have any more general news that you would like to cover?
Let's get specific.
Okay. I've just gone to the Portugal news to try and find...
You have a picture of a sheep farting in another one's face.
Apparently there's been good sales of lamb from the Alentejo, which I think is like the southern region of Portugal. I cannot remember. It might be like a central region. I guess maybe like Portugal's got like good lamb stocks. I don't know. It's quite a sort of rural, rustic country now.
Is that okay?
In terms of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Interesting. Some military personnel died.
From Guns N' Roses?
GNR, I'm guessing that's like...
National Republican Guard?
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll get into that as well in probably the next part. Yeah, so I mean, I think the most interesting part of like Portuguese news for us is probably like the COVID stuff, I guess.
I would like to visit Portugal. I've been to Spain lots, but various different parts of Spain. But I've never been to Portugal. Sorry, I think we've. No, we haven't. I was going to say we've sailed down past it, but we haven't. We didn't get that far on the ferry when we went to Santander because we would have overshot our port if that were the case.
Yeah, we might have flown over on the way to Tenerife.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Anything else here that seems vaguely interesting? Oh. I'm guessing this is a sort of a climate change thing of Iberian governments, which I think would just be Spain and Portugal, maybe Andorra, are having to collaborate because it's becoming drier in that region.
Right.
Yeah. And it's quite desertous in parts of Spain, although I don't think there's a true desert in Europe. Depends what you count, but apparently European Court of Human Rights has rejected complaints against Portugal.
Who was complaining? Case filed by a judge who was detained in Timor-Leste, subject to disciplinary proceedings in the Superior Council of Magistrates. All right, so there's a judge who's been detained, and he's claiming that it was longer than it should have been.
Interesting as well. That's in Timor-Leste.
Is that pronounced right, or is it Timor-Leste?
Depend. I mean, I generally say like East Timor because that's like the English translation, but it does literally mean east.
Where is that?
It's we actually covered this in Indonesia, so there's a bit of crossover here. It's sort of off the edge of one of the Indonesian islands.
I was going to say, I'm sure that's not in. So how is that a complaint against Portugal then? Was it the Portuguese?
Well, it used to be a Portuguese colony.
Oh, right, okay.
Like in the 70s, so I don't know. Before Indonesia invaded it, essentially. Yes, it is.
I mean, I know we're only on the second country, but I've already been really quite surprised by. I mean, it's probably a measure of my ignorance, but on history and geography, but been quite surprised at the range of influence that Portugal's had and connections with the outside world historically, and I think that's possibly a reflection of where they are now in terms of world power, if you like.
A lot of the sort of European powers have, I guess, fallen a long way in some ways.
Including
us. But Portugal has really been quite poor for quite a lot of the 20th century, and even now.
Well, Spain as well. I mean, I know we're not talking about Spain, but that's that sort of peninsula is kind of, they were. I would have thought, I don't know, maybe we'll find out when we get further into different countries, but I'd have thought that Spain, maybe just due to its size, would have had more influence than Portugal globally. But I may be wrong. We will find out. Cliffhanger.
So I think it's various complaints about people who've been possibly wrongfully imprisoned or imprisoned for too long. But it's sort of an interesting position there for Portugal to find itself, because it's for a lot of the sort of latter part of for a lot of the last decades, I think it been trying to sort of get a better position in Europe. So things like that might undermine that, especially since, and we'll get into this, up until the mid-70s, it was essentially under a fascist dictatorship, like Spain was.
Yeah. Just goes to show, doesn't it?
Apparently, illegal immigrants in the Algarve. I'm guessing it's sort of got a similar situation to a lot of countries in the Mediterranean, possibly immigrants from like Northern Africa, but I do not know. the wine industry is apparently struggling. And yeah, that's an interesting thing because port, the fortified wine comes from the city Porto.
Porto, all right. Okay.
Yeah. Which we might get to where that actually sort of came from.
What are those spanking paddles? Oh, they're flights, aren't they? They're wine flights, are they?
Yeah, I hope so.
They look like spanking paddles.
It's an interesting cultural affair.
I would imagine. I've never seen a spanking paddle, so I wouldn't know.
Various economy stuff about tourism and banks closing down. So I think it's sort of the general story here is that businesses are probably struggling in the pandemic. It's not like there's any sort of massive news, I think, you might get for Indonesia. There is relatively limited stuff here. Oh, and apparently the Parliament approved a ban on pigeon shooting.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, because they're considered vermin, aren't they?
I do not know.
Yeah, they banned them from... They banned pigeon feed sales from Trafalgar Square. Used to be a massive kind of tradition when you went to London to go to Trafalgar Square and buy some bird seed and feed the pigeons, but they banned them to try and get rid of them because they spread diseases and stuff.
I guess.
I think that was possibly back in the 90s.
Anyway, shall we get started with a piece of music?
Why not? Yes, because I have some various different... we'll go right back to early.
How early are we talking? 'Cause I've got stuff from 1000 BC.
No, not that early. I think it's got a mixture of influences, partly in the same way that we have in Britain with cultural things because of its kind of spread out into the world and its connections and stuff. So first example I'm going to go with is a classical music. There's not a huge amount of classical music that people would know much about unless you're really into it. But back in I don't know how far back we'd be talking. There's a composer called Duarte Lobo. Anyway, this is an example of polyphony, but basically it's kind of plain song from back in. I'm gonna really show myself up here. Right, that was where I knew I'd found it somewhere. There's a little bit of information on him there. Right, okay. Renaissance, early Baroque time. One of the most famous composers of the time. As I say, I've not heard of any of these other composers, but it's very peaceful. Oh, I have to reload the page. Sorry about this. This is because I've got other pages open. We're not hearing anything, are we?
No.
We are now.
Yeah, because sometimes things take a while to start.
They do.
So this is, I don't know if you said Requiem for Six Voices.
Yeah, it's polyphony sort of. It's basically you've got a multitude of parts going on that each have as much importance as the other. There's not with a lot of music that we're used to, there'll be a tune and there'll be harmony sort of chords and there'll be a rhythmic and there'll be a bass line. But with polyphonic choral music, each part is as important as the others. So it's kind of...
So this is very much going to be in more the religious tradition of Portugal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of this had something to do with... a lot of it was originally grounded in the Romans coming across and the early Christians and stuff during the height of the Roman Empire. This would have been later on, but it was a kind of a hangover from that, if you like, because it was a long time. Music in most countries didn't really start developing until the sort of mid-teens of centuries, if you know what I mean.
I think it's just the sort of what survived, because a lot of the music would have been passed down.
Yeah.
Well, I think we do have notation from quite early on. I think it's like some poem, Enheduanna.
Right. Yeah, it's
from, like,
interesting looking at some of
Sumeria.
the kind of the development of notation is quite interesting because it's quite pictorial.
But we only have like limited parts of it,
Yeah.
and I don't think anyone really agrees on how the notation's supposed to be played, because it's just so ancient. It's sort of inconceivable.
Yeah. What I'm going to do is, because rather than going with the YouTube clips, because I just thought, well, why the hell am I going with YouTube clips when I've got Amazon Music? So I'm just going to leave it playing in the background quietly for atmosphere, and we can go into the, because there won't be any adverts interrupting this time. If it's too loud and putting you off, just let me know.
You can turn it up a bit.
Okay.
Okay, so just to start with, a little bit of a sort of overview on Portugal, just to put this into context. So, if you don't know where it is, it's on the Atlantic coast of Iberia, the Iberian Peninsula, which is that little bit that juts out of Western Europe, containing Spain and Portugal, primarily. So, Portugal's to the west of that, but there's a
Like the bottom left-hand corner, isn't it?
yeah, sort of. And it was once an extremely powerful country, as I was saying, and
I'm assuming, just because of its geographical location, that at some point was it at one with the rest of the peninsula, like nationally? Did it break off from Spain at a particular time, or are we going to get to that?
we'll get into that because it's sort of gone back and forth a couple of times.
Oh, really?
I mean, that sort of power drive, this is quite a bit on, but that's kind of to do with basically the drive for colonization in general was to do with like getting a trade route to India.
Well, I was going to say, I would imagine that a lot of it has to do with its advantageous position for shipping, isn't it?
But basically it was driven to like go around Africa.
Yeah.
And later, like Columbus sort of launching.
I have to
that
make
sort
an
of-
honourable mention of the Suez Canal not having existed then.
Yeah. Well, effectively that is the reason why everyone went round that way, and why a lot of places got colonized. It was just basically trying to get some of them sweet spices from India.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so you might not actually know this, but Portugal does actually have quite Celtic origins.
That's interesting, that. I'll bring that
sort
up
of
again in
the
the music
Celts
side.
sort of originate, I think, sort of around about the south of France.
Right.
And they sort of spread out from there. I mean, they've got quite a wide spread of the sort of people. It's not like one defined country
Yeah.
of Celts, but yeah, they spread up to Britain. They spread over into Iberia. All sorts of stuff. And it's more specifically the Lusitani people.
I've heard of that. Is Lusitania a country?
I believe it's possibly... It used to be a... like an alliance of these peoples.
Right, okay.
But it might be a region now of Portugal or elsewhere. Legend actually has it, though, that the capital Lisbon is founded by the Greek hero Odysseus.
Right, okay.
That didn't probably happen, though, because the Lusitani people were already there, but it's kind of a mythos to Lisbon. Its name, the name Portugal, comes from a Roman settlement, Portus Gale, which is sort of overlapping the modern day city of Porto.
Right. Oh, yeah, I see. Never thought of that.
Because they wanted to go around to India, this means that they also pioneered a lot of the technology and sort of navigation techniques to even do that. Just sort of out of necessity, which allowed them to build up this massive empire in South America, quite notably Brazil. Africa, I think they got Angola and Mozambique mainly.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that to see that some of the most dominant kind of colonial empires that developed were the ones that had convenient access to the sea, really advantageous.
And I think Nando's basically comes from the sort of mixture of Portuguese and Mozambique cuisine.
I could really handle a wing roulette just now.
I probably could not. But yeah, they got a lot of influence from this sort of empire, both in Europe and across the world. Its north is actually pretty cold and sort of rocky. It's sort of, I think, Galicia's sort of a similar situation.
Yeah.
But it's got quite a nice warm south that's really quite fertile, which sort of lends itself to a more sort of rural, traditional life over the sort of modern opulence of like massive, towering cities.
Yeah.
It still has some sort of empire. It's got the Azores and Madeira Islands in the Atlantic.
Right, yeah.
Which I think were kind of like a stepping stone for getting to other places.
Are the Azores pretty much slap bang in the middle of the Atlantic?
Pretty much, yeah. It's kind of probably the closest uninhabited land to Portugal, which is why they got that.
Right, okay. But it's inhabited now?
Well, yeah. It wasn't when they went there, because it's just an island in the middle of the Atlantic. People can't really get to.
I mean, that must have been a weird kind of... At that time, obviously, there's no kind of radar technology or kind of satellite technology or anything like that. Just like coming across an island in the middle... Well, you don't know where you are, do you?
Maybe
original explorers.
Various navigation techniques, cartography. A lot of clever maths and things like following birds, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I suppose.
Navigating using the stars once they'd figured out how to do that.
Yeah.
So it's sort of first founded as Portugal with that name as a county. I think of the Kingdom of Leon, which is one of the, I think, 4 kingdoms that make up what is now Spain.
Right.
Which is Leon, Navarro, Castile, and Aragon.
Interesting.
Spain's actually relatively new.
Castile must be the top sort of right area of Spain. I know.
I think
Castellon's up that way, and there's the Catalans, isn't there?
Catalonia's like down to the south east.
Is it?
Like Barcelona.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Well, Barcelona's like the capital of Catalonia, so.
I always thought they were... Maybe I was getting mixed up with...
There is also the Basque Country.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. I was thinking of sort of, not terrorist organisations particularly, but kind of, rebels, if you like.
Yeah, Spain's got quite a lot of different sort of autonomous identities going on in a somewhat similar sense to the UK, I guess.
Yeah.
So it became the county of Portugal in the year 868 AD and achieved independence in the first place from Leon in 1128, although it would take a while for that to sort of form up as modern Portugal in terms of territory, because for quite some time there was like Muslim, not even like just like Muslim peoples in Iberia. So like throughout the first few centuries of that millennium as a whole, that region was just going through like the Reconquista,
right?
Which is essentially kicking the Moors, the various Muslim groups, out of Iberia.
Right. Okay.
Because they would have come from Morocco.
Yeah.
And its sort of most modern iteration, as a sort of democratic state, although you can sort of argue a bit about the time of this, came after the Carnation Revolution in 1974. So actually after you were born.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of a few facts here. Its largest city and its capital is Lisbon. That's got about 2.8 million people. And its overall population is 10.3 million, which for context, Jakarta's population, I think, is actually bigger than that.
But it's interesting that almost a third of the country live in the capital.
So its GDP is $221 billion. That places it as the 49th biggest economy in the world.
Right. Which is quite a drop, isn't it, considering where they will have been at certain points in their history.
Yeah. It uses the euro. Official language, as you might expect, is Portuguese. And there's also Mirandese. I don't know where that comes from.
See, I came across that.
Like a regional language.
I came across that word in looking at some of the music. I think it's kind of a folk kind of...
Yeah, I would be interested to get onto like the folk music, because I think that'll have a much more unique flavour.
Well, that when you mentioned about the Celtic connections, it kind of made sense, because some of the folk music that we'll come on to seemed to me to be kind of a mixture of almost Scottish and Far Eastern, which was quite strange. Just the music that the instruments that were being used, but along with the musical content, it had that kind of weird kind of mix of sort of almost Indian and Scottish together, which was weird.
Interesting. I mean, it might have some influences from like Indian music.
Yeah.
Its system of its largest religion, as you might expect, Christianity. That's about 84% of the population, with 81% of that being Catholic. There is still quite a strong divide, sort of north to south, in terms of Protestant Catholic in Europe, which I think Germany and France are both kind of split still on. 8.3% are undeclared, and 6.8% are officially have no religion, and about 0.6% have other religions.
Interesting.
System of government.
Quite a religious country then.
Yeah. It's a unitary, semi-presidential constitutional republic.
Pardon?
Essentially, it's the way it kind of works is there is a president and there is a prime minister. The president has sort of symbolic authority.
Bit like our queen.
I guess. The closest thing that I could find to it is probably France's system of government, if you're more familiar with that, but you might not be.
No, not really.
But yeah, they have a parliament and a president. Its head of state, its president is Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, and current prime minister is Antonio Costa. Antonio Costa is...
I've got to make a Starbucks joke.
No,
sorry.
The Socialist Party?
Yeah.
Which is a sort of... I mean, looking at like political party names across Europe, they'll tend to just go towards whatever seems kind of like popular at the time of their founding. So quite a lot of the parties that are like called Social Democrats or liberals even, they're not really that, but this sort of is sort of a centre-left.
They were trying to catch the popular vote at the time.
Social Democrat Party. Its flag currently is a red and green field. It looks a bit like an eye test. And the national coat of arms is sort of at the intersection of those two sections.
Indeed.
It uses green, which is not something that's very traditional. It's sort of a Republican element.
Right.
Traditionally, blue would have been used as that's sort of the royal colour along with white. And green is supposedly said to represent the hope of the people, and red, the blood of the people.
Is that why we don't have any green in our flag, because we've got no hope?
Well, we're not a republic.
No.
So we use the royal colours, which I imagine are red and white. Or for Scotland, blue and white.
Yeah.
So red, the blood of the people dying for their nation as well.
Nice.
So it's got quite... it did have like a proper revolution in 1910 to become a republic.
Right.
And then it went under fascism following that. But we'll get to that in probably the next part.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to, before I get on properly with the history, start your next piece of music, or do you just want to keep this going?
No, that's fine. Next, I'm not going to stick with the sort of ancient sort of classical music, because there's so many different kinds of modern music. So we're going to move on to...
I have heard about Fado.
Fado, yeah. Arose in Lisbon, and is the music of the urban poor. So they're typically lyrically harsh, accompanied by a wire-strung acoustic guitar or Portuguese guitar, and it's basically the singer being resigned to sadness, poverty, and loneliness.
Oh, joy!
It's claimed that that Fado origins are actually older, though, going back to the 15th century, when women cried with longing for their husbands that sailed to the never-ending seas. So basically, there were a lot of people that were missing people that were off exploring and colonising the world, obviously, and that led to some quite emotional music. So we've got, this is Fado. Oh, excuse me.
This feels more like what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite nice.
It is. It makes me want to sit in an outdoor bar under some parasol with a jug of the local...
Yeah, it feels like someone could be like...
beverage, whatever that might be.
Just up on stage, on like a wooden stage, saying this while you're just having some dinner and drinks.
Yeah.
Anyway, to kick us off, I'm gonna do
Sorry, I just before we move on from that, the sound has been described as the song of those who retain and cherish their illusions, not of those who have irretrievably lost them.
Okay.
Sorry, carry on.
I've started with a section on early history, which I've sort of termed as going from the sort of early origins of that Lusitani people, going from like the first millennium BC up to 868 AD or CE, whatever you want to use, because that's when it becomes like a proper county as Portugal.
Yeah.
So this is just sort of the background to Portugal. It's not really Portugal at this point. Celtic peoples during the first millennium BC start to enter Iberia, because you're talking about like movements of like ethnic groups over quite a long period of time at this point.
What would have driven that? Like trade, presumably?
I mean, it says here that the reason that they were particularly forced into Portugal was natural pressures, so I'm guessing it's just various things of like trying to find fertile land. Right,
so there would essentially have been almost refugees, really.
Yeah, I guess in a way.
Not necessarily political refugees, but...
But yeah, the political boundaries are, in terms of human history as a whole, are quite a new thing to be this defined. I mean, they've been defined sort of throughout more recent history by like various different treaties, but now we have fairly clear borders, although there's a lot of regions.
Shit, it's snowing. Sorry.
I'm sure there's a song "Snow in April," isn't there?
Probably. I don't know.
Anyway, so around about this time, also Phoenicia, and by extension Carthage, or like Carthaginian influence, is reaching where southern Portugal is, because sort of Phoenicia's sort of around about sort of Lebanon area, sort of Middle East, bordering the the Mediterranean. And from that, Carthage is sort of built in northern Africa, I think now either in Algeria or Tunisia. I don't actually know if we know, because Carthage has literally been destroyed. There is very little trace of it left.
Right, okay.
Because the Romans salted the earth on which it was built so that nothing would ever grow there again.
Kind.
That's how much of a fucking vendetta they had against Carthage, which we'll get into now. So there's some like Iron Age cultures throughout this millennia, various hilltop settlements called castros, and these remained for quite a while after the Romans were there. So Second Punic War, this is the one in which Carthage gets destroyed.
Yeah. When is this?
This is 218 to 201 BC.
Right.
And this is between Carthage and Rome. Following this, I'm not really going to go into the Second Punic War because it's not massively important to Portugal itself. What comes next is more important.
Right.
Just know that Carthage had some influence in Iberia, and the Romans kind of destroyed that. So they begin to dominate the southern parts of Iberia. Not quite where to Portugal is, just like a few different parts of it. There were actually people in Iberia before the Celtic peoples moved in, so they sort of absorbed and began to sort of occupy western parts of Iberia. So these guys form a federation of various different I guess settlements.
It's a bit like Civilization 6, isn't it? It's like, sorry, carry on. It's
called the Lusitani, and these form under the leadership of Viriathus. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right.
Easy for you to say.
And these guys surprisingly managed to actually resist the Romans for quite some time. I think sort of in our view of like the Romans, we sort of see them as like, oh, these very disciplined bringers of civilization, but like there were civilizations all over Europe. They just got called barbarians because they either weren't Greek or weren't Roman.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the Romans got to write the history books, literally. Viriathus gets assassinated in 140 BC.
Who's he?
He's the leader of the Lusitani at this
time.
Yeah.
So.
And so Decius Junius Brutus leads the Romans northward.
Biggest dickus.
Across the Douro, which I believe is the river that runs through, I think it's Porto. I will have to look it up on the map. Yeah, the Douro River is so... Porto's sort of in the north of Portugal, and
right.
So essentially the Romans had advanced over most of what is now Portugal. If they came from the south. Here we go. And they made it like all the way up to Galicia and managed to subdue them.
Yeah.
Even Julius Caesar governed the region for a little bit of time. Before I think that was before he went on his like whole war against Sulla.
Okay.
You might not know who that is. Anyway, 25 BC, Augustus Caesar founds the city of Augusta Emerita, which is actually in Spain. It's Merida in Spain. But this is the capital of the region of Lusitania, which incorporates a fair amount of Portugal.
Is that not the name of the main character in Brave? Merida.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
I'm guessing
Celtic
there might
connection.
Be, yeah. And Galicia to the north is like a separate thing, and that comes governed by like a different dynasty. So various different districts sort of develop into, I think it says, Beja and Evora. They become like a wheat belt, and the Tagus Valley becomes like really important for farming and horses, and there's mines in Alentejo. It kind of just the Romans using this area for resources.
A development of...
So by the 3rd century AD, Christianity reaches Lusitania.
Took its time, didn't it?
Well, I mean, you're talking about... it's essentially spreading by word of mouth.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's like active missionaries here, especially for quite a while. Being Christian was illegal in the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
As you'll probably know. And it reaches Galicia in the 4th century. So by 406, it says foreign invaders. They force their way into Gaul, which is sort of France-ish region. Yeah. And they come across the Pyrenees Mountains to a Germanic tribe. And like I say, it's not really accurate to sort of think of these guys as barbarians. They are just a different kind of people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Suebi.
In a similar way to the way that a lot of Western civilizations used to talk about savages.
Yeah. I mean, I think some still do, but...
Mm-hmm.
So the Suebi, this Germanic tribe, they begin to settle in Galicia, and their rulers reside in what is now Braga. I think it was called Bracara Augusta at the time, and in Portus Calais, the namesake of Portugal.
I was going to say, that sounds very like Portugal.
So then they begin to annex the whole of Lusitania, and then go on to get the whole of Iberia. And then the Visigoths...
I've heard of them.
They're part of a number of different barbarians that
they sound like superhero miserable teens.
Yeah, it is. I don't know what the link is there between the Goths, like the Germanic people, versus.
They're very good at metal.
Yeah,
Germanic countries.
So they extinguished the Suebi monarchy, the Visigoths, in 469. There's apparently not very good records of what actually happened up until about 550.
Right.
That's when the Suebi monarchy is restored, and they convert to Catholicism.
Right, okay.
But 711, Muslim forces, because you've got to keep in mind, Islam actually didn't really exist as a religion up until about I think it was about 500 AD. And during that time, they spread quickly. They went all across the Middle East, all across Northern Africa, and now up into Iberia. So there's quite a lot to do in that time. Compared to Christianity.
Jews are like, come on, guys, come on.
Yeah, they keep getting invaded everywhere. So, the Goths resist, particularly in Merida. But, yeah, Berbers sort of from Morocco area come across Portugal in Galicia and
Berbers.
So Abd al-Rahman I sets up the Umayyad monarchy in Cordoba. That's in 756.
Cordoba? Is there not one of those in South America somewhere?
Yeah, it'll be named after this.
Yeah.
That's in Argentina.
Right. Okay.
I think Cordoba's actually in Spain, but there is overlap since it's not really Portugal yet.
Yeah.
The West, including Portugal, I guess, puts up a bit more resistance. And Lisbon even actually becomes independent for a little while in the early 800s.
It's a weird sort of thought, that, isn't it? Independent cities, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there would have been a lot of various city-states across Europe for some time. Hold on. So, the Christian sees in Galicia are restored. I'm guessing there's like some drive by the Pope to take this area.
The Pope does a drive-by.
Apparently, some tomb of an important saint is found, St. James, and they erect a shrine in Santiago. There's also a Santiago in South America. It's the capital, Chile.
Chile, yeah. So do they speak Portuguese in Chile? Was that one of the places
they speak Spanish in Chile. I think the only place in South America that some parts to the north of Brazil, but it's mainly Brazil that Portugal got. And we'll get into why.
Right, okay. Because they had all the coffee, no doubt. I mean, actually, I was joking when I said that, but when you're talking about trade routes, it might actually be linked to coffee.
They might have cultivated it there, but that would have come from, like, Arabia.
Right, okay. Mm-hmm.
So they once sort of Christianity sort of establishes itself more as a political power, a frontier territory of Portugal is set up in 868 by someone called Vimara Perez, and Coimbra, which is sort of the capital of Portugal for some time after this, and also the site of one of the oldest universities in the world. In terms of Portugal, there are some older ones. I think Oxford's older.
Yeah.
That gets annexed, although it does get lost later. Essentially, the Christians are trying to take back Portugal here.
Yeah.
From Berber Umayyad forces, that sort of thing.
I see.
And that sort of is the beginning of the county of Portugal. It's still not really the whole of Portugal.
The beginning of the county of Portugal.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that's the start of the medieval period, 868 AD, and we can have our next song. Okay.
So we're going to move on to some of that regional folk music that we were talking about. People of the Azores Islands maintain some distinct musical traditions. So, wow, there's local musical instruments in Madeira, such as a machete.
Interesting.
But this was the folk music was the one that I was thinking of. Now this was some artists such as Galamdum Galandana sing in the Mirandese language. Some residents sing in both Portuguese and Mirandese, so that was Mirandese that we mentioned earlier on. But this was the one that I thought sounded, when I was playing it, like it had instruments that were kind of a cross between sort of Celtic and Indian almost. But
yeah, I can definitely hear the sort of Celtic singing there.
Yeah, but it's almost got a kind of Eastern tang to it as well.
Yeah.
There was like there's some kind of wind pipe instrument that's not bagpipes but very similar to it looking, but sounds really kind of I don't know if it'll come up in this song.
Oof. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely got a kind of it's definitely got an Eastern twang to it, but it's also very Celtic as well, isn't it?
there's definitely, you can hear a mix of different cultures coming together, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, traditional bagpipes, a cappella vocals, and a unique musical scale.
I mean, that's kind of like the way that...
I don't think there's any bagpipes in here, but maybe later.
Modern pop music kind of got its start in various different peoples being brought together.
Yeah.
Having their musical influences.
Yeah, I mean, you get obvious examples of it, because fusion music is like rife in all different kind of styles, but you get very obvious examples of it, like Walk This Way by Aerosmith and Run DMC is an obvious fusion of rock and rap kind of music. But yeah, that's how music just
but then
developed.
Both rock and rap kind of come from blues originally.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to get started on the medieval period, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Okay, so the county of Portugal, which at this point basically consists of all of modern Portugal that's to the north of the River Douro, because Muslim forces still own quite a bit of it. The Douro, again, that river that runs through Porto. This is held by Mumadona Diaz by the 10th century, as well as her husband, Hermenegildo Goncalves.
Jimena who? What?
Hermenegildo Goncalves.
I thought you said something else. I do apologise.
And their sort of dynasty there, one of their sort of heirs there becomes the father-in-law and a tutor to the Leonese ruler, Afonso V.
Oh, is that bagpipe thingy? Sorry, carry on.
So this dynasty actually gets overthrown by Navarro and Castilian house of, I think he's generally referred to as Sancho the Great, but Sancho III of, I guess, Navarro, Castile. And this county sort of gradually loses a bit of autonomy. However, Sancho's son uses this to sort of reconquer Coimbra after it was lost in... he reconquers it in 1064, I don't know when it was lost. He actually entrusts this to a Mozarabic governor, which is, if I remember correctly, kind of the Muslim peoples of Portugal.
Kind of drifting off into this music's ace. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's to do with like a sort of mixing of romance and Muslim culture there.
Right. Okay.
So he actually entrusts that to a Muslim governor despite reconquering it, I think, for the Christians. However, the Almovorids, which are like a group from Africa, they're sort of the Berbers still, they annex quite a bit of Muslim Spain, and there's quite a lot of similar names here. We've got Alfonso VI. He rules Castile and Leon from about 1072 to 1109. He defends Portugal, essentially, and using his brother Henry, who he's married to his illegitimate daughter Teresa.
Henry doesn't sound like a very Portuguese name, but...
Apparently he's the Duke of Burgundy. I don't know if that actually means he's from Burgundy, which I think is in either France or Germany. I cannot remember.
Right, yeah. I mean, royalty just kind of intermixed across Europe, didn't it? Really?
Yeah, that becomes a problem later.
Yeah.
So when Alfonso VI dies, he passes on his titles to someone called Urraca. However, Henry of Portugal wants more power, He doesn't really get much of that done before 1112. So he leaves Teresa with an infant son, Afonso Henriques, who later becomes Afonso I. Teresa, this guy from Castile and Leon's illegitimate daughter, she kind of has intrigues, which I think just means she had an affair with a guy from Galicia.
Intrigues.
Yeah. So this guy from Galicia, Fernando Perez of Trava, this kind of loses her support among the nobility, which means that followers of her son, Afonso Henriques, defeat her and her lover in the Battle of São Mamede, and that is in 1128. They then drive her into exile. So Afonso Henriques, her son, becomes the Count of Portugal, and is initially supposed to sort of bend the knee to his cousin Alfonso VII, because everyone's fucking named after each other here. This gets very confusing with John's.
I was just going to say, it might be completely barking up the wrong tree, but is there any connection between the name of a region being a county and the name of a count? You know, the title of a count.
That's the origin of counties.
I did not know that. I'm learning something every day.
Baronies are ruled by barons.
Yeah, but you don't really get baronies
Kingdoms are
much
ruled
now,
by
do you?
kings.
Yeah, I kind of got that, yeah. Or queens.
Yeah, they don't usually get called...
yeah, we should be the United Queendom at the moment, shouldn't we?
Yeah, but I feel like that's probably someone's drag name. But Afonso begins to call himself king. This is some traditional thing after he wins some victories over the Muslims, trying to do like this whole Reconquista thing. And Alfonso, his cousin, begins to sort of recognize the autonomy, but doesn't officially recognize him as king until 1179. Hold on. And well, I think that's kind of, he's sort of forced to recognize him as king due to protection of the Holy See.
Right.
Because the Papal States are very powerful at this time in history.
Yeah.
It's quite a small country now that does have quite a bit of influence beyond its remit, but it used to be a whole lot more powerful.
How did they get that power? I mean, what drove it? You know, I mean, we see so far within Indonesia and Portugal are obviously quite closely linked historically, but it's all been about sort of trade routes and
well,
yeah, I mean,
it's kind of, you're getting into how religion itself works there.
Politics of religion, yeah.
I mean, really, it is kind of, it is more political than religious in a lot of ways.
But really, I suppose it's more about power over the mind, isn't it, rather than the economy.
But I mean, like, the clergy would have been quite rich as well, with like various donations to. I mean, the fact that they could also like excommunicate you and launch inquisitions, that sort of stuff.
I suppose money and power have always been closely linked, haven't they?
Yeah. The Catholic Church was and still is very fucking rich.
Yeah.
So Afonso I, manages to capture Santarém and Lisbon in 1147, and he actually uses English, French, German, and Flemish crusaders who are on their way to Palestine. And an English priest called Gilbert of Hastings becomes the first bishop of the restored see of Lisbon.
Sorry, Gilbert's just a funny name.
But it is interesting that basically because they were on their way to a crusade and they had to go through the Mediterranean, they were just like, oh yeah, let's just help these guys form Portugal properly.
Yeah. Just for something to do.
You know, while we go to fuck up Palestine some more. a new Moroccan dynasty comes up, the Almohads, and they strike back, sort of. They begin a war in 1179, and that lasts until 1184. But the Portuguese sort of establish a frontier on the Tagus. The Tagus is the river that runs through Lisbon, I think. And that's by the time Afonso I dies in 1185. Right. There's a new military order, the Templars. This is...
Where are they? Because
they're all over the place. They're just kind of like the knights of the of Christianity, effectively.
Yeah.
But they gain to have quite a lot of power. They begin governing their own castles, various different frontier territories, and a religious order, the Cistercians, sort of develop agriculture and architecture around about central Portugal. Right. Afonso's heir, Sancho I, begins to enfranchise. I don't actually know what that means necessarily, but kind of just sort of developing various different...
Does it not? I mean, certainly in terms of franchises nowadays, it's kind of almost like an outpost where you allow somebody to be a part of your organisation in name to give you some kind of legitimacy.
Yeah, it's probably kind of a way of administrating them.
Yeah, we don't want to kind of run your shop or country, if you like, or your area, but if you want to use our name, we can help you with supplies and stuff. As long as you uphold our principles.
Yeah,
kind of.
By the looks of it, they get some certain privileges, these communities, which attracts settlers. Also, some Muslims even get to be enfranchised under this, although quite a few go into slavery. I
suppose it's kind of beneficial to both, because you're both kind of lending more legitimacy to each other and helping each other out like a... Yeah.
So again, with assistance of Crusaders, Sancho manages to capture Silves, which is, I believe, a city in the Algarve, which is sort of the southern region of Portugal. That's in 1189. Next year, an Almohad army comes from, I assume, Morocco, but it just says Africa here, and they go all the way up to the Tagus. And the Muslims managed to recapture Silves in 1191, as well as most of the land south of the Tagus. So basically, all of Portugal below Lisbon.
Yeah.
Sancho makes peace with them before he dies in 1211, and leaves his son Afonso II to strengthen Portugal by using the church, effectively.
Right.
So new Afonso II's followers.
I still can't. Sorry, I just got Happy Days stuck in my head.
They fight alongside Castile in various different battles against the Almohads.
Hey, Fonzo. Sorry. The beer's kicking in now.
It's a lot of just they're recovering various different cities from Muslim forces over time.
Yeah. Can we move on to another bit of music just so that we start getting through them? Because I've got quite a lot of different kind of...
Okay.
How far are we going in history in part one?
Probably either up to 1580 or 1640.
Okay. Well, the next bit I've got is kind of linked to we've been listening to regional folk music, but I'm heading into sort of popular music genres now, and folk pop is something which there's a contemporary folk singer-songwriter called Anna Mariano from Aveiro, who had a debut single, Ordinary View, which was featured on a compilation called Novos Talentos FNAC, New Talents of Fnac. What the fuck is Fnac? A large French retail chain selling cultural and electronic products. What? Okay. Anyway, there's a singer-songwriter called Anna Mariano whose stuff is quite influenced by the whole kind of folk music tradition. It sounds a bit like this.
Silence.
Is golden. Do I need to refresh? Professionalism.
Doesn't seem to want to play.
It doesn't, does it? Keep talking.
Okay.
It was just starting and I stopped it. Okay, here we go. Right, so it sounds like this. We can just leave it running if you want to carry on with the history thing.
Afonso II actually rejects some of the estates his father gave to his brothers, instead giving him to his sisters after going to war with Leon, which the Pope has to settle. This is to sort of determine his sovereignty as like King of Portugal. Also, in Afonso II's first year, he calls the meeting of the courts, which is sort of kind of like a sort of proto-parliament of the nobility of Portugal. This is sort of the first meeting of this, and this is this will continue well into like the late stages of Portuguese monarchy.
Right.
This like summons nobles and members of the clergy to sort of have their say. Various religious and military, I think it's mainly the Templars and the Cistercians, get quite a bit of power, allowing them to sort of drag Portugal into conflicts, which Rome is involved in. Papal Rome. Basically, he begins to sort of put in commissions which investigate these orders, because quite a bit had been illegally taken from the crown. This is in 1220.
Just trying to relate this back to what was going on. What is this before they'd been over and done any of that stuff in Indonesia that we were talking about?
Yeah, that's in 1511.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Most people aren't sailing that far, not open ocean.
Early development stages.
Not much is known about his successor, Sancho II, but by the time he's king in 1223, the church basically has full power, and the Algarve had essentially been recaptured. So the Reconquista seems to be going quite well here.
Yeah.
His brother, Sancho II's brother, Afonso, becomes Count of Boulogne in France.
Boulogne.
I don't know how to pronounce that.
I'm not sure myself. It's. I think it's Boulogne.
Yeah, he marries someone called Matilda in
Boulogne. Don't know.
1238. Anyway, basically in 1245, this Afonso guy's another Afonso the Third, I think, is given papal commission to basically take over.
They just
Portugal.
come up with another name. Fuck's sake.
And he basically is given permission by the Pope to depose Sancho II in 1245. By the time Afonso is in Lisbon, he has basically full support of the church and the population in Lisbon, and quite a few other surrounding towns, and declares himself king.
Just declare yourself king.
This causes a 2-year-long civil war, in which Sancho ends up having to, probably essentially be exiled, but it says retired to Toledo. He dies there in 1248. I'm not sure if that's of natural causes or of that's like in Basel, but basically that makes it a lot easier to usurp him because he's dead.
Yeah.
Afonso III manages to bring together what has been quite a divided kingdom, completes conquest of the Algarve, moves the capital from Coimbra to Lisbon, and in 1254 allows commoners to be represented.
Commoners?
I don't think it's like proper democracy, but like they're allowed to have a say, which is quite unusual for 1254.
I was going to say, yeah, that's really very advanced, that, isn't it? Politically.
I mean, it's just sort of ways of, I guess, like hearing like the concerns of farmers, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But also it probably makes him more popular, so there's not like uprisings where he dies. Anyway, basically, because they've conquered the Algarve, this makes the kingdom of Castile jealous. I guess of like wealth of like fertile lands that they've captured, but also like the glory of kicking out Muslims from Iberia.
Yeah.
So Castile actually goes to war with them both in 1250 and 1252. The only way that peace can really come about is if Afonso marries Beatrice, who is the illegitimate daughter of Alfonso X of Castile. Yeah, they really need some more names here. Basically, this means that some disputed territory becomes like part of Castile for a little while until their eldest son would reach 7, at which point that would return to Portugal.
Now, I'm looking at this next section with interest.
Interesting. Yeah, so basically, because Afonso is married to Matilda from becoming Count of Boulogne, as well as being married to Beatrice for this sort of peace thing, this, the church isn't too fond of.
Hang on, you've got 2 wives, mate.
Yeah, he's basically given a interdict. Do you know what that is?
No, not entirely. I can look it up if you want while you're talking.
Basically, Afonso does not yield to this, and
so it's an authoritative prohibition. So it's to prohibit or forbid something.
Okay. So I'm guessing they wanted to like forbid this marriage, but his son anyway gets legitimized in 1263. That is Dennis.
Dennis.
Or Denise, I don't know.
Was he a menace?
So following this, basically, I guess as a sort of retaliation, Afonso III launches Inquisitors, which basically deprived the church of a lot of their property after they'd gained quite a bit of power in Portugal.
Yeah.
Which causes a lot of the clergy to just full-on leave Portugal, and Afonso is actually excommunicated, and he's threatened to be deposed. But he still holds out until he dies in 1279.
Good on him.
Basically, he kind of completed the Reconquista in.
I think he had like one wife in one place and one in another, and just kind of moved between them.
Well, marriage was just kind of political at this point, so I doubt he was actually that interested in.
He probably didn't even see them.
Yeah, I mean, they would have presumably had sex to like
consummated,
but yeah. But yeah, it's a very political kind of sex, I guess, which is weird to think about.
All sex is political.
Yeah, it kind of also puts royal power above the church, as well as including commoners in the courts. He did quite a lot during his reign, Afonso III. Oh, this is nice.
I'm really enjoying this, actually. This album, Everything I Touch by Anna Mariano. There's only 5 songs on it. It's still an EP, I suppose. But, it's good. Carry on.
Right, so his son, Dennis, under his rule, Portugal actually becomes a lot closer to Western Europe. They charter fairs and use a lot more minted money. This allows commerce to grow, as well as growing agriculture and shipbuilding. That will become important for later. You okay?
Yeah, it's blizzarding out there. I'm just saying it's laying quite... Sorry, carry on. Just being distracted by the elements. Oh.
Okay. Dennis.
There's a voice in my head asking who I am.
Dennis founds the University of Coimbra in
Dennis?
1290.
Coimbra.
He's also quite a bit of... Coimbra. I'll show you where it is on...
Oh, yeah, Coimbra. Yeah. That looks very much like Cumbria, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's like the oldest university in Portugal.
I want to travel.
One of the oldest.
It's making me want to travel lots.
The world.
I'm big really.
The magic sea.
I've lost my place now.
Sorry, Craig's going to be telling me off for pissing about on the Serious podcast. Sorry, boss.
So he found this university, very old university, in 1290. He does quite a bit of poetry. He likes literature.
Aww.
But it actually becomes more famous for basically agriculture type stuff, and so gets dubbed Rey Labrador or Farmer King.
A famous farmer.
Well, it's sort of developing agriculture is quite important to keep people happy at this time.
Yeah, I suppose.
Because, like, famine.
That's interesting, though, actually, because I'm just looking at that, talking about agriculture and shipbuilding, which obviously had a massive influence.
Well, that will be sort of as well through, like, the development of, like, timber industry.
Right, yeah.
Just, like, having the wood for that.
Yeah.
So 1297, Treaty of Alcañices with Castile allows Portugal to basically own the Algarve, and this creates an alliance between Castile and Portugal. He also stimulates foreign trade, and in 1317 manages to get the Genoese admiral, Emmanuel Pisagno, to build up the Portuguese navy. Again, this is becoming more and more towards like the start of colonialism.
Yeah, this is where navies start to rule the world, really, isn't it?
So it says the mother of Denise's son. I'm not sure if they were married. Hold on, I'm confused.
Is Isabel the mother of Denis's son, Alfonso IV? So Denis's son is Alfonso IV, and the mother is Isabel, daughter of Peter III of Aragon.
Yeah, there's loads of different marriages and various things going on. Basically, Isabel's a pretty influential figure. She becomes actually canonized as a saint, Saint Elizabeth of Portugal. But she kind of uses her political power to basically try and steer Portugal towards peace for some time.
Yeah.
However, this means that when she dies in 1336, Portugal and Castile, who'd previously been in an alliance, go to war again. They reach peace in 1340. So Denis has been succeeded by Afonso IV in 1325. 1340.
That's his son.
Yeah. Afonso IV joined Alfonso XI.
Afonso. Oh, they've got a different name now. They've got Afonso and Alfonso.
Alfonso's the Castilian guy. I'm guessing there's like some linguistic differences. Yeah, so they basically beat the
I wonder that
Muslims
we'd gone back to 4th
in
10th.
No, Afonso IV of Portugal, Alfonso the 11th of Castile,
Right.
or Leon. I'm not sure.
Can you imagine the dinner parties must have been really confusing.
Yeah, I swear to God. Basically, they work together against the Muslims. They have a common enemy there, which is why they stopped going to war. So, Afonso IV's son, Peter, marries Constanca in 1336.
That must be pronounced Constanza, surely.
Constantia, yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
She's the daughter of a Castilian prince, Juan Manuel.
So you couldn't get more cliched than that.
But Peter falls in love with her cousin, Inez
As you
de
do.
Castro, with whom he has several children.
Indeed.
I'm guessing that might be the reason that the war broke out. Afonso, so Peter's father here,
Yeah.
gets persuaded to basically allow Inez to be assassinated in 1355.
Any particular reason?
Well, I mean, it's very politically inconvenient for your son to be fucking his presumably wife's cousin. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it would be. I mean, yeah. It's nothing's changed, has it?
Like I think I did say, yeah, this is where it gets very Game of Thronesy here. Probably the more interesting, relevant discussion will come in the second part, but it's just kind of interesting to see how this power works.
Yeah.
And his successor, Peter the First,
We got a new name.
the guy who was fucking his wife's cousin, it basically his first act is to take vengeance, presumably executing her murderers. He has a pretty short reign from 1357 to 1367, which he was quite a harsh ruler, sort of focused on justice. Although apparently he was quite a good partier, so
Okay.
potato. You know, you execute some random guy for coughing on you one day, you get shit-faced and have a good
Party
time.
under pain of death.
Yeah. So Ferdinand the First, that's Peter's son.
Well, they're rocking it with all the new names now.
That's Peter's legitimate son. Inherits a wealthy kingdom, and this doesn't really come to any sort of political ties, at least not many. But there's some dispute going on between a different Peter, the King of Castile, Castile and Leon, and Henry of Trastamara, who later becomes Henry II, and this is like a dispute over the Castilian throne. We'll get into why that's important. So
Trastamara sounds like an ace place to come from.
Peter, I'm assuming Peter of Castile, gets murdered in 1369.
It's all murder, isn't it?
A bunch of Castilian towns actually pledged their allegiance to Ferdinand I of Portugal, which Ferdinand accepts their allegiance, which causes Henry II, who I'm guessing has gotten the throne of Castile, to invade Portugal.
I wasn't aware allegiance was something that had to be accepted. It's like,
Well,
you can't
you've got,
imagine
like-
somebody sort of pledging allegiance to you and saying, no thanks.
Well, I mean, there's political consequences.
Yeah, I suppose,
because it's
yeah.
Castilian territory, essentially.
Yeah.
So, Peace of Alcutem in 1371, Ferdinand renounces any claim to the Castilian towns and promises to marry Henry's daughter. However, like father, like son, takes an already married Portuguese wife, Leonor Teles, against the wishes of the people, against the wishes of probably his whole political class.
Yeah.
Just decided not to do that.
I mean, you've got to assume that the only reason that somebody in such a powerful political position as this would do something that controversial and politically frowned upon, the only thing that could make them do that would be love. I mean, there can't be any positive result from putting yourself in that position.
There would be political consequences for deciding to marry someone who's essentially like an heir to Castile, because that could mean a couple of generations down, if you don't have an heir, it could end up going into the hands of Castile.
Cunning. Can we move on to another bit of music? Just quickly in between, because that album's finished. I wanted to leave it running because I was really enjoying that. I think I might actually add that to my playlist. But this is the first artist. We're moving on to electronic music now, and it's first artist that has ever been number one in the UK. A person called Rui da Silva, which people may have heard of.
Wait, the first UK number one, or the first piece of Portuguese music that reached number one?
The only Portuguese artist that has reached number one in the UK. I'm not sure if it was the number one in the UK album charts or hang on a second. The only Portuguese musician to reach number one on the UK charts, Rui da Silva. So they obviously have a keen electronic music scene.
Okay. It's not really my type of thing usually, but it's kind of nice background music, I guess.
Yeah. I'm getting more into electronic music because I've been studying it and how to make it and stuff.
Okay, right. Right. 1372, Ferdinand I actually makes an alliance with England, and this is through the Duke of Lancaster, who is John of Gaunt.
I've heard of him.
John of Gaunt marries Peter's daughter.
This is all
I'm not sure which Peter we're talking about here.
It's very incestuous, all this, isn't it?
Duke of Lancaster here lays claim to the Castilian throne, and they're in alliance with Portugal right now. So
Duke of, hang on, carry on, because I'm just, it's already the Yorkshire Lancashire things going on, isn't it? No, carry on. Couple of.
I'm not sure when that would have been, but anyway.
Well, Duke of York's mentioned in a couple of lines, so just carry on.
It's not massively important to Portugal, the War of the Roses.
No, but
so basically, because this guy that they're in alliance with has a claim on the Castilian throne, Henry II invades Portugal again, laying siege to Lisbon, which basically forces Ferdinand to break off the alliance with England, at least temporarily, and form an alliance with Castile. Henry II dies in 1379, allowing Ferdinand I to challenge Castile and reassume that English connection in 1380.
Right.
The next year, John of Gaunt's brother, Edmund of Langley, who's the Earl of Cambridge and later becomes the first Duke of York.
Did he have 10,000 men?
I have no idea.
Did he march him up to the top of the hill?
Fucking no clue.
If he had, would he have marched him back down again?
He takes an army into Portugal to basically invade Castile from, and betroths his son Edward to Ferdinand's only legitimate child, Beatrice. So, Hold on.
You're flagging.
There's just a lot of names here to try and figure out who's married.
And they're all shagging each other, and they're all cousins and daughters and sisters and wives.
It gets worse when you get to the fucking Habsburgs, my god. Anyway, in the middle of this campaign against Castile, Ferdinand agrees to marry Beatrice to a Castilian prince instead of Edmund.
Maybe they should have met some commoners and it widened their sphere of acquaintances. It would have been advantageous.
That would have been very politically inconvenient as well.
Yeah, I know, but...
So instead, Beatrice becomes the wife of John I of Castile, and Ferdinand dies prematurely in 1383, which means that his Portuguese wife, Leonor, becomes the regent of Portugal. And Castile actually lays claim to the Portuguese throne. Again, I think. Anyway, Leonor was having an affair with a Galician again, João Fernandes Andero, who's Conde de Orem. I think that just means Count Conde.
Right, okay. Who somebody else having intrigues here?
Yeah, basically... Portuguese patriots really didn't like this guy because he's a Galician. There's probably some beef with Galicia there. I don't know why. Anyway, oh Jesus fuck! Another fucking John.
So confusing.
The people that didn't like Castile choose. This is a separate John who's master of Aviz, and the illegitimate son of Peter the First.
Oi, John,
who I think is several generations back. Anyway, yes, John manages to kill that Galician.
It's worse than Dallas
lover in 1383. He gets the support of the people of Lisbon and gains the title of Defender of the Realm.
Yep.
Leonor, who was the regent, flees until the King of Castile basically rescues her and retires her to a Spanish convent.
Just be a nun.
Then
just fuck off and be a nun.
Castilian. Well, I mean,
they're not allowed to speak.
Yeah, I remember correctly. It was quite common for like people to be basically sent to either monasteries or convents just to sort of
get them out of the way,
escape punishment. Essentially,
oh right, yeah,
punishment.
Yeah.
So this Castilian king besieges Lisbon in 1384 for about 5 months. But actually the plague forces them to retire from that and sort of stops them invading properly.
I suppose it would really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how badly the plague really affected Portugal. I think it was a lot more pronounced in England.
Yeah.
But I don't know a huge amount.
Do you want me to start to go on to the next bit of music before you hit the Imperial Age?
Sure. This is quite a long section, and we're probably going to stop in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, it's all right. I've got more music to kind of intersperse with. So I don't actually know what this is going to sound like because this is an example of experimental and avant-garde music from Portugal. It has a striving experimental underground music scene since the 80s, with some exponents attaining international attention. This is a notable group or music from experimental avant-garde Portuguese music called Osso Exotico. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but it's going to be interesting finding out. I should be a radio DJ.
Oh.
Or maybe not. What the fuck?
Is that a didgeridoo?
It sounds like a didgeridoo, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess it's sort of like avant-garde music.
Yeah.
Let's say 59 minutes.
Yeah, it's the album is one track. It's just called Musica Number 1.
Okay.
It's got camels all over the front cover of the album for some reason. I don't know
I guess that should last us.
Well, no, I won't play all of it. It's just
Okay.
because we have some Portuguese heavy metal to come.
Ooh. Anyway, Ferdinand dies. So with him, because I don't think he has any legitimate heirs, or at least male heirs. Basically, the line of Henry of Burgundy, who I legitimately don't remember.
Well, you weren't there. How would you remember them?
Yeah, but I don't remember where he was in this story. But basically, someone's line ends, and this causes like a sort of succession dispute. So the courts meet in 1385, and they declare John of Aviz.
Who?
John of Aviz.
Aviz. Oh, okay.
The master of Aviz, of course. Who declares himself king of Portugal.
Sounds like a car rental firm.
John the First, and this is a brand new dynasty, the House of Aviz.
Sorry.
Anyway, many of the nobility and much of the church still think that the Queen of Castile, this is where it comes into you don't necessarily want to marry someone in Castile because there'll be political consequences.
Yeah.
Would be the rightful heir. But John has, he's quite popular and he has quite a few key allies. He has quite an important champion and a good chancellor as well.
I'm just wondering if this if this album is basically this for 59 minutes.
It might be.
Let's carry on.
Just for context, you basically did this research like in the last like hour before we started recording.
Yeah, well, that's how this is going to go down.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't have time to do the amount of work that you do on this.
Fair enough.
I'm a trainee
don't know
teacher.
if I do. Yeah, so different John the First of Castile this time comes with a sizable army to central Portugal in 1385. He gets defeated even though he outnumbers the Portuguese, and this is in the Battle of Aljubarrota.
Okay.
A small force of English archers were actually present in this battle.
How the fuck does that happen?
I assume they were just around. I don't know.
It's like, I'll just bring some English archers with me that I picked up on the way.
But this gives John I of Portugal, not of Castile, an important ally. They signed the Treaty of Windsor in 1386, and this sort of creates an Anglo-Portuguese alliance.
I mean, this implies that whoever was in charge of the forces of English archers at the time had obviously lent some to John I of Castile for some reason.
Well, they might have been like accompanying like a trading vessel, that sort of thing.
I suppose.
I do not know. But basically, they were just kind of happened to be there in that battle, so that kind of started quite a long-lasting relationship between England
actually,
at this time.
I'm just reading the next line. They're an important ally with the Treaty of Windsor.
Yeah.
So that kind of... I don't know. Yes, but that must be English related, but...
Well, it essentially sort of creates...
Because the House of Windsor didn't exist until...
This Anglo-Portuguese alliance exists for a very long time.
Yeah. Right, okay.
I don't know if there's that much of that left anymore, but it goes up into at least the Napoleonic Wars.
Right, yeah.
That
would have been
possibly longer. John of Gaunt, who is apparently still around, goes to invade Castile in 1386. This is with the help of John I, I'm assuming of Portugal. They aren't successful in this, but essentially this means that the Portuguese king, John I, has to marry John of Gaunt's sister, Philippa of Lancaster, who actually sort of introduces a lot of sort of English cultural practices to Portugal.
I don't understand. What intrigues me is how all of these people, rich and aristocratic sort of royalty people, moved around and got from place to place, and why they went where they did. And because, I mean, you know, Philippa of Lancaster, she's obviously from Lancaster or from around the north of England.
Maybe, I don't know. Quite often these people aren't actually from where they're governing.
But, you know, it's just interesting to know why. I mean, did they just travel around for the hell of it because they had money and they could?
It would have been so John of Gaunt had like a political tie there that they couldn't go back on.
I suppose once that whole political kind of machine is in motion, it kind of drives itself, doesn't it? It's not, oh, I'm going to go there for no reason.
Supposedly supposed to be sacred.
Yeah.
So, the church would get on your back if you went back on agreements that were made because of marriages. Yeah. Anyway, they arrange a truce with Castile in 1387. But this doesn't actually create peace until like 1411.
Got some clarinets now. Carry on.
John essentially gives all his followers a lot of rewards for any victories that were made against the Castilians. This is done at the crown's expense. Although, despite that, commerce still manages to prosper. And hold on, they apparently have good trade with Flanders because of a different marriage with his daughter to
Ned.
Flanders is
no, it's in France. Yeah.
It's not,
isn't it?
Belgium. Although this is kind of France at this point anyway. So
do you know why I thought that? But yeah, Belgium makes as much sense. It's In Flanders Fields is the beginning of a war poem, isn't it? Who's that by? Is that Wilfred Owen?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I did learn something at school.
Basically, now that they've got peace with Castile, this is sort of where the empire starts. John I sends his frontiersmen to go and conquer Ceuta in Morocco, which is actually now, I think it's an exclave owned by Spain. It should really be Morocco, but it's been owned by, like, I guess, Iberians since 1415 here. This is sort of the beginning of Portuguese expansion. So the reason that they would have expanded into Africa, there's probably a number of things going into that. Some of that would have been sort of a partially religious, political idea of fighting Muslims in, like, Muslim lands rather than in Portugal. But also exploring a route to basically get spices from India, as well as spreading Christianity further afield.
Right.
So the third son of John I and Philippa of Lancaster is Henry the Navigator. And Henry the Navigator goes on an expedition in 1418 to Porto Santo.
I wonder if they were known by these labels at the time, or if they were given these labels after.
Well, he would have been given this epithet, but it's just Henry.
Yeah,
of ease.
Henry the Navigator. Off you go, navigate.
These guys also attempt to settle the Canary Islands. I assume they're unsuccessful because Spain now has them. And they also visit the Azores in sort of roughly between 1427 and 1431. So the Azores of Madeira were uninhabited islands at the time, so it's fairly easy to colonize them. They're colonized by about 1445, and this is used to basically export sugar to Europe. So it's again this thing of
See, I don't necessarily have an
getting
issue
cash
with
crops.
that kind of colonization. It's like, if you find somewhere that's uninhabited, by all means, develop it. But it's when you kind of find somebody and just take over.
But yeah, it's this sort of idea of a lot of these colonies were used to grow particularly lucrative crops to basically build the crown's wealth, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Edward takes over from John. He rules for a fairly short amount of time, from 1433 to 1438. In 1437, he tries to capture Tangier, using Henry the Navigator and another brother, Ferdinand. Ferdinand gets captured by the Moors and they just don't pay his ransom, so he dies in 1442.
I bet he's like, oh, thanks a fucking bunch.
Anyway, yeah, so that was quite a short reign. The main interesting thing that happens there, they try to capture Tangier, which is a Moroccan city. Edward's heir, however, Afonso V, is still a child when he dies. So Edward's brother, Pedro, the Duke of Coimbra, also known as Dom Pedro, you may have heard that name.
It sounds like a wine.
Yeah, I will look it up.
I'm sure I've seen it on a bottle of wine, Dom Pedro. I'm thinking of Dom Perignon, maybe. Where else might I have heard that name? Dom Pedro drink. One of South Africa's most popular cocktails. Oh, it's Dom Pedro, not Dom Pedro.
Yeah, I don't particularly know. There are perhaps multiple people that become known Dom Pedro by the looks of it.
Maybe.
Anyway,
Sounds like a mafia boss.
he becomes regent in 1440 instead of Edward's widow, Leonor. But this regency becomes challenged by the very powerful Bragança family.
Mm-hmm.
Or Bragança, I'm not sure. This is the wealthiest family in Portugal. This is descended from a different Afonso, who is the illegitimate son of John of Aviz and Beatrice. Hold on. Jesus.
Beatrice, who is the daughter of John's champion, Nuno Alvarez Pereira.
Yeah. So John had a champion who is an important ally. Beatrice is his champion's daughter.
Yep.
They had an illegitimate child.
She had that with John of Aziz. Yep. Aviz.
So there's this dispute here over Edward's brother and this other line of the same
It's
guy.
amazing. I mean, it's the thought that this is all documented and chronicled somewhere, so that, because I mean, it's really fucking confusing. So, who was writing all of this shit down? You know.
I mean, I presume it would have been. I mean, they would have to legally write up quite a lot of it.
Yeah, but at the time, a lot of the literate skills were kind of the realm of like monks, weren't they? Really,
to some degree, the nobility would have been taught quite a bit of it as well.
Yeah, but there were no printing presses or anything, so.
There might have. I can't remember. That might have been 1492.
Yeah. Caxton.
But it's in this century that happens.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the young Afonso V, who is technically king right now, but his uncle Pedro is the kind of actually ruling things as regent.
Yeah.
So this powerful family manages to influence him as a child to basically force him to give up the regency, and he actually takes up Pedro takes up arms against the Braganca family, but is actually killed by them in 1449 at Alfarrabira.
Let me know if you want any heavy metal, by the way.
I don't mind. Prince Henry, which I think is Henry the Navigator, might be a different Henry, manages to actually explore quite a bit of the African coast. I'm assuming the West African coast. He goes as far south as Sierra Leone, so I'll just pull that up on a map quickly for you. So he comes from like here,
quite a way down then.
Down to about there.
Yeah, that's quite a way down.
This is sort of where Portugal's leading the way.
I didn't realise how I didn't realise exactly where Morocco was. I knew it was at the top of Africa, but I didn't realise it went that far down on the western side.
Yeah, that's kind of disputed as well.
Is it?
Because there's like Western Sahara, which is...
I was going to say, because the Canary Islands are kind of opposite the Sahara, aren't they?
Yeah, but there's like sort of, I guess, indigenous peoples there that are kind of self-governing, but they're not officially recognised by many people, so...
Yeah. So it's all still going on.
Yeah. So, yeah, by the time, I think this is Henry the Navigator dies, he's explored as far south as Sierra Leone, so that's quite impressive. Afonso V sends military expeditions to Morocco in 1458, 1463 and 1471. He
doesn't give up, does he?
This manages to capture the cities of Tangier and Arzilla. Okay, so Afonso V marries Joan, who's the daughter of Henry IV of Castile, which allows him a claim to the Castilian throne.
That's a bit sneaky.
You might actually know who these guys are. This causes quite a long war with Ferdinand.
I wasn't actually around, you know that, don't you?
But you might have heard of Ferdinand and Isabella because of like the story of Christopher Columbus.
All right, okay,
they're the guys that
yeah
basically sponsor him to go.
Right, okay.
Find a route to India, but he just ends up finding America because you know, a bit of an idiot.
Took the wrong turn.
Well, he has like this theory that the world is actually a lot smaller than people think it is.
So he thought he was heading to India.
Yeah.
But the other way, as it were.
Well, like, yeah, because everyone knew the world was round since like Ptolemy, so...
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so there's a long war with Ferdinand and Isabella in some particular regions, I think Zamora and Toro here. But Afonso is actually defeated by 1476. Anyway, Afonso V tries to get the help of Louis XI of France, but he fails in this endeavour, so has to give up his wife's claims, which is something that he never really gets back from. And his son John administers the kingdom until he dies in 1481.
Let's have some heavy metal.
Okay.
Some Portuguese heavy metal music. There are a few Portuguese heavy metal bands, apparently. Moonspell. There's one of them I'm sure I've heard of, maybe. Oh, maybe not. Ramp, Heavenwood, Corpus Christi, Reactor, WC Noise, Tarantula, and Attic Demons.
Interesting.
Oh, Attic Demons have achieved international recognition. Anyway, Moonspell. This is Moonspell, apparently. And I should have refreshed the page already, but I wasn't ready. I am awfully sorry. I came unprepared. Don't know what kind of heavy metal this is going to be. Could be.
Might take a while to build up to the...
Heavy metal does, doesn't it? So, sounds very sinister. interesting though how a lot of popular music based acts sing in English.
Yeah, that'll be probably kind of by
Not
proxy
always,
due to British influence, but also American influence.
Yeah.
Anyway, so John II, he's kind of a cautious and firm ruler, as he's called. But at his first courts, he demands that all his vassals, sort of all those that sort of ruled the counties and duchies below him, swear an oath of homage to him, which they're kind of pissed about. He also sets up a fortress and trading outpost in the Gulf of Guinea in 1481, and I assume like one of his navigators, Diogo Cao, explores the mouth of the River Congo in 1482.
Explores the mouth of the river. That must be quite big then, if he's exploring the mouth of it.
Sort of here.
Oh yeah, that's quite a big mouth.
It's sort of going a little bit inland, I guess.
Yeah.
Just to sort of find out what's going on in Africa.
This is not bad music.
So John II suspects conspiracy from the Duke of Bragança, which allows him to basically arrest him and execute him in 1484.
Yeah.
I assume related to exploring the River Congo. The Congo Kingdom converts to Christianity in 1486.
Do you think this was pre-Umbongo?
What?
This was pre-Umbongo. They drink it in the Congo. Yeah, what happened there? We lost the recording.
Yeah, and then you fumbled about incompetently for like 5-10 minutes. Anyway, I'm not entirely sure where we left off, but basically all I was saying is after the Congo Kingdom converted to Christianity, that sort of allowed it an alliance with Portugal, so that may have been more of a political thing than a religious thing, but the two were very much overlapping in most cases. Anyway, yes, 1488, explorer Bartholomew Diaz reaches the East African coast, which opens up the way to India, kind of. Because, I mean, Arabia would have been like trading a bunch of spices at this point, but that's quite far away from Portugal, so they want another way.
So you can see them kind of heading towards the East Indies now.
However, 1493, the news of Christopher Columbus's discovery, I guess, sort of reaches the reaches Portugal. Although it's sort of under the guise of finding a route to the Indies, even though it was just you found America. But yeah, that news reaches Portugal, which causes some interesting political things, because Spain has claimed all lands that are to the west of the Atlantic.
Okay.
Because they can just do some that, apparently.
As you would.
Portugal's understandably a bit pissed about this.
Is that not kind of the same as America putting their flag on the moon, though? And
yeah, but they can't legally claim that.
Yeah, they haven't officially claimed it as theirs.
There are treaties that prohibit essentially claiming parts of space for any particular country.
Yeah, so far.
Similarly for Antarctica.
All right,
I think that's lasting until about 2050.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be renewed. But basically, John's the new king. I fucking forget who's king at this point. But anyway, basically says, okay, Spain's rights of anything to the west of the Atlantic is limited to what's more than 390 leagues west of Cape Verde, which I think is a Portuguese territory. I didn't really cover that, but basically the Treaty of Tordesillas draws the line of demarcation essentially across the Americas, and that means that area that would become Brazil is sort of marked out for Portugal.
Right, okay.
And the rest of South America is marked out for Spain, because you can just claim that. Just, I claim everything over here. It's mine.
Yeah. So, I mean, at that point, was it really just kind of Aztecs and Incas over there?
There would have been various different Mesoamerican civilizations.
Yeah.
In terms of South America, I think the Mapuche were in like Argentina.
Yeah, yeah.
Various different, I think it's Quechua peoples, sort of various different indigenous groups. The biggest empires, I guess, were like the Inca, the Aztecs, that sort of thing.
It's really interesting though, because those indigenous people would presumably have split off from their European and Eurasian kind of counterparts when Pangea broke off, like in the evolutionary tree.
No,
not that they were people at that point, but
those continents were well separated by the time humans even really existed.
That's what I mean. They obviously weren't biologically people, but that's when the biology must have separated off.
No, that all of that started in Africa, or kind of also.
So how did they get there then? If
they walked over ice from like eastern Russia to Alaska.
Ah, right, okay.
There was ice.
Yeah, I forgot how close
like,
that
the
was.
last ice age, which is also how like people got to Britain and Ireland.
Right. Okay.
That's
interesting. Yeah. So I was thinking it's that makes more sense, because it was almost, I was thinking, well, it's really weird that humans developed separately from such an early point, but they didn't. So
no,
that's kind of...
I mean, you'll find that a lot of the sort of Amerindian populations have sort of more, I guess. I mean, it's kind of, you're getting into like kind of fake separations of humans, which are just kind of like, oh, there's skin color differences if you're in different parts of the world, because that's how the sun works.
Yeah.
But like they'll have more similarities with like East Asian people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, John II's illegitimate son, again, fucking loads of illegitimate children here, dies before him, and so his cousin Manuel I ends up taking over after he dies in 1495. Right.
We will probably need to be winding up soon. How close are we to
I said we'd go up to either 1580 or 1640. So
1580?
Yeah. Anyway, Manuel I basically inherits an autocracy. He sort of uses this to expand the overseas empire, and takes on the title of Lord of the Conquest, Navigation and Commerce of India, Ethiopia, Arabia and Persia. Because, you know, you can just claim all of that. So, 1497, Vasco da Gama, he set sail on essentially, I think, Portugal's first proper expedition to India, and reaches Calicut. The survivors return in 1499 with a bunch of merchandise from the Orient. They prepare a second fleet under Pedro Alvarez Cabral, which reaches Brazil in 1500, and he just basically claims the whole of Brazil for Portugal.
As you do.
Manuel hoped that Iberia would be united under the House of Aviz, and so wanted to marry Isabella, who's the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. However, she dies in like 1498 during childbirth. Anyway, her son, who she dies giving birth to, Miguel de Paz, becomes recognised as the heir to Portugal, Aragon and Castile, but ends up dying in infancy. And so Manuel instead marries Isabella's sister, Maria, who dies in 1517, and then later Eleanor, who is the sister of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V.
Of course she is.
Anyway, basically as a condition to marriage to Isabella, Manuel is required to remove the Jews from Portugal, which was done in Spain in 1492. And
who by?
They were ordered to leave within 10 months or convert.
Presumably by the Holy Roman Catholic Church.
Isabella, I'm assuming, or whoever was involved in Spain, wanted them gone. I don't know if there was political influence on this or if they just had like religious convictions on that. But yeah, this sort of anti-Semitism goes back a very long way. Anyway, essentially, a lot of these sort of, whether or not legitimately or not, I don't really know, converted to be new Christians, and that's sort of, they were called Moranos. However, in 1506, a large number of these were actually massacred in a riot in Lisbon. So Manuel offers them some protection and allows them to emigrate to Holland, where they can use their sort of trade knowledge from Portugal to assist the Dutch, which becomes important for the Dutch later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Francisco de Almeida arrives as a sort of viceroy of Portuguese Indian territory in 1505. He supports a sort of local ruler against a Hindu ruler of Calicut to sort of secure trade, I guess.
Is that anything to do with what became Calcutta?
I'll have to look that up. I'm going all over the world here. So just quickly look up this here. Yeah, no, I don't. I think Calcutta is it's actually Kolkata. Yeah, it's there.
All right,
it's quite a distance away.
So no, then.
No, I mean they'll have linguistic connection probably, but you know, they essentially get control of the sea trade because in the east because they managed to defeat quite a lot of the Muslim naval forces which are sort of dominating that area. Almeida's successor, Alfonso de Albuquerque, manages to conquer Goa in 1510, which sort of becomes Portugal's seat of power in India, and quite notably Malacca in 1511, which is sort of where Portuguese history intersects with Indonesian history, because that sort of marks the beginning of colonization of the East Indies.
Yeah.
As well as Hormuz, which is in the Persian Gulf in 1514. Basically, the idea is they set up a system of various different strongholds which they kind of use as trading posts,
right?
As well as to sort of exert political influence wherever they are, which allows them to dominate trade for about a century. And Goa actually becomes the chief port of Western India, and Malacca becomes a gateway to the South China Sea, opening up trade with China. Hormuz controls the Persian Gulf. Anyway, Manuel's son, John III, this is actually quite an important figure, takes over in 1521. However, he's unable to resist the influence of Castile. Spain's not really a thing yet. And his wife, Catherine, basically encourages him to install the Inquisition in Portugal in 1536.
I've never really understood exactly what that was, other than the Catholic Church basically being dicks to people all around Europe.
Oh,
You say it installs the Inquisition. It's almost like
exercise their authority.
Yeah.
Make sure people are behaving like good Christians. I mean, it was often just used as a sort of political ploy to get rid of people you didn't like as well.
It just seems a weird way to phrase something. That's install the Inquisition, like it's an object.
Anyway, 1529, there's the Treaty of Zaragoza. So there's a dispute in the Moluccas. That's like one of the Indonesian groups of islands. So they need like a similar sort of line that they drew across South America in the East Indies between Spanish and Portuguese territory. I think this is why the Spanish owned the Philippines for a long time.
Right.
Anyway, but, you know, sort of splitting across these lands with just Spain and Portugal kind of pisses off England a bit. Because they're like, what?
It's a bonus.
I want in on this as well, mate.
Yeah.
Although France and England are kind of busy.
See, this makes a bit more sense of all of it, because when I did history at school, obviously a lot of it was a lot of British history and English in particular. All of this stuff about like the Spanish Armada and the Navy-based stuff, the conflict, it makes a lot more sense when you think about where the trade routes would actually have been developing, because we'd have had to go past France and Spain and Portugal to get down past Africa.
Which is why sort of England's colonisation efforts, for the most part, started in Canada.
Right, yeah.
Which causes some issues when they bump into the French in Ohio. Anyway, so the Congo Kingdom has its first Christian king, also Afonso the First this time. So he makes his capital Mbanza Congo a centre of Portuguese influence. He renames it to São Salvador de Congo in 1534, but sort of internal division in the Congo Kingdom kind of makes Portugal turn its attention to Angola instead. For now, Pérez de Andrade reaches Guangzhou, which is a Chinese city, in 1542, and Portuguese merchants settle the colony of Macau in 1557.
Right.
Which was actually Portuguese until 1999.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's in a sort of similar situation to Hong Kong, in terms of like being a city-state that's technically part of China, but it's also got like some autonomy. Anyway, right. So John III's successor is Sebastian. Sebastian's only 3 when John III dies in 1557. Anything else?
I don't think he would have made him very effective.
Well, quite often they'll be ruled by regents that might be their mother or uncle, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
1576, Paulo Diaz de Nuves founds Luanda in Angola, which is the first European-style city in West Africa, which is south of the equator.
Right.
Luanda is the modern capital of Angola as well.
Yeah.
Sebastian is obsessed with crusades from quite a young age, particularly against Morocco. He's very fanatical and basically only listens to those that would flatter him.
Yeah.
Wonder if there's anyone who sounds familiar.
I've just realised that I've been getting things mixed up. I've been thinking about Portugal in terms of Indonesia instead of... it was actually the Dutch, wasn't it, that was over there?
Yeah, I mean, they sort of started that effort, but, like, I mean, sending their own trade experts to Holland might have actually played a big role in the Dutch gaining control there.
Right, yeah.
Anyway, basically he launches large expeditions against Larache. He's defeated in utter humiliation by the Moors. He loses 8,000 of his men, as well as his own life, and a further 15,000 get captured. It's quite a severe defeat here. So he gets succeeded by his great uncle, Cardinal Henry, but him being a cardinal, he's quite old, and he's also celibate, which isn't exactly great for a ruler, which means that the line of Aviz is ended. Anyway, this is... I'll wrap up soon, because I can tell...
Should I just go on to the last bit of music before we finish the episode?
Okay.
We're on to Portuguese hip-hop.
Interesting.
The hip-hop began in Portugal in the early 1990s. Various artists from hip-hop tuga genre, what's hip-hop tuga? It's a Portuguese variety of hip-hop. Differs from mainstream hip-hop because it's got strong influences from African music, from Lusophone Africa, reggae, zouk, and fado, which we mentioned before, didn't we? Fado. So anyway, some of the artists, General D. This particular one I'm going to play it there. There are other ones: Slow J, Papillon, Da Weasel, Dilemma, Valletta, Regular, Boss AC, Mind the Gap, Bob the Rage, Sens Delays. But the one I'm going to play is from an act called Sam the Kid.
Se durante o processo de construção o autor vos remeter para uma estrutura quase demente, é porque foi usado mais por demais coração.
Not what I expected from hip hop.
It's definitely different, isn't it?
Esculpindo frases ao sabor da inspiração,
Kind of more
vestidas por minimal
spoken word poetry.
So far.
Yeah.
de emoção, provocando aqui e ali a moralidade vigente. E se de repente o sonho ganha asas de vulcão,
I think it might change, but we'll leave it running in the background while you finish off the historical stuff.
Anyway, Philip II of Spain. Spain's now become like a proper thing. He's the nephew of John III. And Jesus Christ.
Husband? Hang on.
So Philip II is
Husband of John and the Third's daughter.
Yeah, which, yeah, so married his cousin, I guess. Because, you know. So he makes preparations for when Cardinal Henry dies, because, you know, the old celibate dude, he's not having any heirs. He dies in 1580. This is why I might end it in 1580. He sends an army into Portugal to get the authorities to obey him, basically trying to bring Portugal under Spain here. So, Antonio of Crato, he's an illegitimate son of John's brother Luis. He launches a resistance. This quickly falls apart, making Philip II of Spain Philip I of Portugal.
Okay.
And so Portugal and Spain enter a union in 1580, which I could take you up until 1640 when that sort of dissolves, or we could wrap up here.
Probably best to wrap up here because we're well over the time mark.
I mean, it's just so I can actually get an equal amount in the next part.
I mean, you could. Yeah, go on then. It's just I need the loo, but it's not going to be long, is it?
Okay. Right. Anyway, the island of Teixeira in the Azores actually holds out for Antonio. So Antonio uses this to make alliances with England and France from his base in the Azores. 1582, there's a French expedition which tries to install Antonio as ruler of the Azores. This fails though. 1589.
Can I just pause you a minute? Because I'm thinking, does this sound more like hip hop?
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Anyway,
Interrupting your flow.
The English attacked Lisbon, and that's actually led by Francis Drake and John Norris.
Sticking our noses in.
Well,
John Norris, that's such an English name.
they have quite a strong tie to Portugal here, and also Antonio's making moves here. This also failed abysmally, so Antonio just ends up dying in Paris in 1595.
Bit sad.
However, Sebastian, despite being a complete and utter fucking failure, actually becomes a sort of patriotic symbol of Portuguese independence from Spain.
Not completely useless then.
Quite a lot of people actually believed he wasn't really dead and would reappear at some point, which 4 people pretended to be, and that went up until 1600, and the furthest afield one was from Venice.
Okay.
So Philip I, or Philip II of Spain, wanted Portugal to remain somewhat autonomous, and so appointed only Portuguese administrators, and would quite regularly talk to the courts, just to make sure that they were okay with what he was doing.
Yeah.
However, his successor, Philip II of Portugal, or Philip III of Spain, who takes over in 1598, kind of neglects this. And his successor, Philip III of Portugal and Philip IV of Spain, just completely overruns, completely violates Portuguese autonomy.
But it kind of implies that they're still actually separate countries, even though they have the same monarch.
They're separate kingdom titles.
Yeah, right, okay, yeah.
These, I'm assuming both Philip II and Philip III fail to even visit Portugal. They appoint Spaniards to administrative positions. They lose Portugal a bunch of trade, drag them into foreign wars, and tax them heavily to try and sustain these wars.
I bet they were popular.
So, yeah, the Portuguese people begin to seriously resent the Spanish.
Yeah.
1624, this is where the Dutch start getting involved here. The Dutch actually seize Bahia, which is part of Brazil. The Spanish and Portuguese together expel them, but then they end up occupying another part of Brazil, I think, which is Pernambuco.
It's interesting though. So basically, if Spain and Portugal hadn't been in cahoots together, the Dutch might own Brazil now.
Parts of it. I think actually they might have gotten. I think Suriname is what the Dutch actually ended up getting.
Fucking big, isn't it?
Yeah, it's genuinely fucking massive. Hold on. So they occupy that in 1630, and as well as like the area around it, and they hold that for probably about a generation. So 1634 and 1637, there are 2 Portuguese insurrections which fail, but in 1640, the Spanish plan to use Portuguese troops against Catalan rebels. While also in a war with France. This is not very popular. So basically, French agents managed to convince a different John, who's the grandson of Duchess Catherine, who's the niece of John III. Her claims were overridden by Philip II. So basically, they lead a nationalist revolution against the quite unpopular governor and drive Spanish garrisons out of Portugal. So John IV, the Duke of Bragança, is crowned King of Portugal in 1640. However, the Spanish won't recognise that independence until 1668.
That's like 28 years during which Portugal is saying we're independent and Spain is saying no, you're not.
Yeah,
that's an interesting.
To see what happens with things like Catalonia or Ireland
or Scotland, potentially soon.
I don't think it would come to something like that, but it could be a tricky constitutional legal situation.
Well, the thing is,
I mean, I know this is digressing a bit, but if the SNP get this majority and Boris says, no, you're not having a referendum, they're going to hold one anyway, what we call a wildcat referendum. And if that goes to independence, there's a good case for the SNP to say, well, we're an independent country now, and Westminster to say, no, you're not.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not going to probably come to anything that dramatic, but these things do happen even in the modern day with things like NATO recognizing people's independence.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
I would say civil war is much more likely in Northern Ireland.
Well, yeah, there's been some car bombs today on police, hasn't there?
Anyway, yeah, we'll probably end it there.
Okay, well,
so we've sort of been taken through much of the sort of medieval part of Portuguese history up until it's sort of really about to start its empire properly. It's in a pretty tricky position, just coming out of occupation from Spain, and now because Spain don't recognise their independence, they're under threat of invasion, so they need to make some interesting decisions here. We'll see how they come out of that next time.
I've brought up for the national anthem, which we use for... we're going to say goodbye before we hit the national anthem.
Yeah.
But before we do, I'm just going to mention that I brought up the YouTube version so that we can have a look at the lyrics and their translation as they go through, because it's very patriotic, but it also kind of teaches me a bit about what patriotism actually is.
Well, I imagine this will be very much in the sort of realm of the Republican side of things much later.
Possibly, but I mean, it's the whole thing. It's nearly 5 minutes long.
Okay.
The whole national anthem. So, but I was actually quite shocked that anyone looking at what patriotism actually is can actually, with any conscience, use the term anti-patriotic as an insult, because patriotism is actually quite a nasty thing.
Interesting.
Well, Mum looked up the term, and it's basically George Bernard Shaw defined it as the belief that your country is superior to all others based on the fact that you were born there. That's the definition of patriotism. So basically, if you're anti-patriotic, you don't believe that you're...
have different views of what that means, but also the sort of like where that intersects with nationalism. There's a sort of degree of nationalism that's to do with sort of independence, self-determination, which there's some quite interesting examples across Africa of how that nationalism sort of started out and where that is at now, where some ethnic groups are persecuted by those that were previously fighting for self-determination, where it turns from that idea of liberating yourself to dominating others.
Yeah. Interesting. Anyway, let's say goodbye and then we can have a watch of this national anthem.
Oh, yeah, shit. Anyway.
That was part one.
Do you have any final thoughts?
No?
No, your head is empty.
My bladder's full, though.
Okay. I hope that was enlightening.
Confusing.
And you got a bit of a sort of idea of what was going on in Portugal, how that might cross over with some history that you're more familiar with.
We're getting a flavour for it. I've got a funny feeling there's an awful lot of European history which will have a very similar feel.
Yeah, I kind of picked it so it would cycle between different continents so that we would get a bit of a different sort of episode each time. Because the way history is recorded changes very much depending on...
And it is interesting to see how globalism is kind of emerges from all of this as well.
Oh, this is an example of that, trying to learn about the world we live in.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, I mean, I've only really been formally taught mostly British history as well.
Yeah.
Some American history, I think, but it's a limited purview.
Anyway, come on, we're 2.5 hours in.
Okay. Anyway, I've been Firebolt.
I've been the Orbiter.
And this has been Breaking Borders, Episode 3, Portugal, Part 1.
Bye!
Bye.
What's Portuguese for bye?
Assume something similar to adios.
So, Portuguese national anthem. Ah, the flag there. I didn't realise the crest was off-centre. Heroes of the sea, noble people, valiant and immortal nation. Raise once again today the splendour of Portugal. Should I be reading this out?
I mean, this would probably have come out of sort of a...
Among the haze of memory, O fatherland,
They
one
would have been
feels the
still quite
voice
proud of their empire.
of your distinguished forefathers that shall lead you to
Even as-
victory.
Republicans, because, like,
To arms,
previously that would have been part, like, the monarchy.
to arms over land and sea.
I feel like this will make a lot more, this will be a lot more impactful
To arms, to
in the
arms.
next part. Can you...
Yeah, but I mean, it's a national song for the fatherland. Fight. It's like basically just calling people to war against the cannons. March on, march on.
Yeah, well, these were supposed to rally people.
I'm shutting up because you're going to tell me off if I keep reading out the lyrics.
And just sort of appreciate it.
Appreciate it. What, the music? You mean?
Yeah.
Oh right, okay. Yeah, I can appreciate music, but that's a bit of a strange line. Kiss your merry ground.
I'm guessing there's some things that are a bit more poetic in
Maybe.
Portuguese.
But it's very I mean, actually, yeah, musically this is a lot nicer to me than a lot of national anthems.
Yeah. One that I'm interested to get to is Azerbaijan, because theirs actually sounds like fucking Battle of Mordor or something.
All right,
It's very intense, their national anthem. This one's quite frilly, I guess.
Let the echo of an offence be the sign for a comeback.
Some of the
Sort of somebody insults you.
Some of the newer national anthems do sound just kind of really poppy and kind of shit, if I'm honest.
Newer national anthems. Yeah, it's a bit not keen on the. It'd be interesting to see what Scotland's national anthem would be. I think it would
Flower
probably
of
be
Scotland,
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
but it's technically, I don't know if it's a national anthem. It's kind of one of those, like, it's a
little uncomplimentary towards the English.
yeah, but it doesn't
Which is not a problem for me.
didn't like God Save the Queen originally have like a line about crushing Scots.
I don't know. I know there's 3 verses. It's a bloody long national anthem, this, isn't it?
There are much longer ones.
Are there?
Yeah. They usually go for an abridged version, but
I was going to say, I'm sure this is a repeat of the first verse. Again, quite quite military in nature, isn't it?
Greece adopted a shorter version, so it's only 6 minutes. Uruguayan national anthem.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.